Hello and welcome back to the Backyard Horse Enthusiast. Success in the saddle isn't just about skill. It's about mindset, resilience, and the power of connection. And no one knows this better than Coach Kathy Goodman. A lifelong equestrian and multi-sport athlete, Kathy brings a unique perspective to equestrian training, lending her experiences in show jumping, dressage, liberty work, dance, surfing, and even hang gliding to help riders become stronger, more confident, and mentally prepared for the challenges of competition. As a certified pressure-proof coach under the guidance of Coach Daniel Stewart, Kathy teaches riders how to overcome performance anxiety, build resilience, and thrive under pressure. And with her background in sports psychology and a master's degree in clinical mental health on the horizon, Kathy is on a mission to help equestrians reach their full potential, both in and out of the arena. This episode of the Backyard Horse Enthusiast is brought to you by our generous sponsor, Shagbark Lumber and Farm Supply in East Haddam, Connecticut. For over 4 decades, Shagbark has been my trusted local source for quality horse care products, feed, and farm supplies. Stop by and see why Shagbark is the go-to destination for horse lovers in our community. Shagbark Lumber and Farm Supply, where you can find everything you need for your horses and farm. Join us today as we dive into Kathy's innovative approach to mental toughness, cross-training, and creating lasting bonds between horses and riders. Now let's dive into today's conversation with Coach Kathy Goodman. Get ready to be inspired by her unique methods for building confidence and connection, both in and out of the saddle. All right. Hey, Kathy, welcome to the Backyard Horse Enthusiast. We are so happy to have you as a guest on our show.
Hi, I am so honored to be here and super excited about it because I really like sharing my message. It's super fun.
I love it. You came to the right place, and we love to hear what people like you have to say and want to share with us. And with that being said, my friend, I'm going to dive right into the questions that I've got
Awesome.
for you. All right. So this is looking at you as a multi-sport athlete. Okay. This
Yes,
is from your
totally correct.
perspective
Yeah.
as one, because my God, woman, that is exactly what you are. You have had experience in many different sports. Okay. From riding, dancing, surfing, even hang gliding. Are you crazy? How have those experiences influenced your approach to working with riders and to help them build confidence as equestrians?
So I think there are a few ways in which it definitely influences it, even just like a very basic understanding sometimes that horses can kill us, right? Like they have that ability, just like flying a hang glider. Like if we're not really thinking about it in a responsible way, that can be fatal too, right? Like it's unlikely, right? Like we don't clearly, it's not the desired outcome, but also like our teachers can put us in positions where that may be a potential outcome, right? Like even as a beginner, where we're not maybe necessarily aware of how deep we're getting in too fast. So I think that's definitely something that influences my approach about being like making sure that people are just informed about what they're doing, not in like a doomsday scenario. Like, hey, you know that like a horse could kill you, right? Like they're big and they have like instincts that, right, like not, I don't tend to approach it that way, but it's just like, hey, when we're around horses, we really want to be safe. And here's why, because they're really big, right? And because like if they step on us, it's really going to hurt. And if we fall off, it's probably not going to be pleasant. And like, and these are like the realities of what we do. And I think just like, arming people with a certain like healthy dose of like, these are some of the realities of what we're about to do is okay, right? Like we don't have to paint this picture where like nobody ever falls off here. Like no, people fall off. Like it happens. Like it happens to all of us at some point. It's going to happen to you, like at some point, hopefully not very often, but like it'll happen and you'll get stepped on, and you might get kicked, or you might get like a really strong hip check that like really takes you out. Like, these things, they happen and it's part of it. And I think being able to just acknowledge it is a huge piece of it. But then there's like the other side of it with like the surfing and the dancing, like way less likely to be fatal, right? Not like nearly as on the surface dangerous. But they're sports that really require connection with another, whether it's connection with the ocean and what the waves are doing, or whether it's connection with a human partner. They both require a great deal of connection with another that's not yourself. And so then there's, to me, like the second realization that, the horse is not a motorcycle or a bike. The horse is a sentient being. They're choosing to participate with us because, like, let's be real, we're not going to force them to do something they're really not into, right? That rarely ever works very well for anyone. And so if I have to ask, then I want to make my ask appealing, right? Just like I would if I went to dance with someone. Like, if I can choose from a line of dance partners, I'm probably going to choose the person who looks like they showered this week, the person who looks like, they have nice clothes on, the person who makes eye contact with me, like, right, the person who might even like invite me in and offer a hand, right? Like that person I'd like to be with, but the person who like doesn't look at me, hasn't showered in 2 weeks, is not very well put together, is wearing dirty clothes, like, I'm probably not as likely to go up to that person. So there's a way in which we can approach our horses in a similar manner. It might not be wearing like cologne, and it might not be wearing really nice shoes, because I don't know how much the horses really respond to those things. However, there's a way we can approach them and be inviting, and a way that we can maybe be very off-putting. So that's how I incorporate those.
I like that. Indeed. You teach Coach Stewart's Pressure Proof program.
I do. It is.
And that focuses on mental toughness and how to handle pressure. Can you give us a glimpse into how this program helps riders manage their nerves and perform better under pressure?
Yes. So I love Coach Stewart's program because basically what we're saying is like, look, anybody who wants to be good at something, whether it's golf, whether it's basketball, baseball, horses, we do a lot of practicing, right? Golfers hit a lot of golf balls, basketball players shoot a lot of basketballs, baseball players hit a lot of balls and throw a lot of balls. In riding, right, we all agree in a very simple way that we spend a lot of time posting, a lot of time practicing our canter, a lot of time on our transitions and our turns and things like that. But the one thing other than at the horse show that we don't really spend a lot of time practicing is how to handle pressure. So really the program is in its simplest form designed to help riders practice handling pressure, right? And we do that in the most fun way possible. We play games, right? We put a clinic together and we say, okay, we're going to mock up this like sort of show like scenario. There's going to be a couple of us and there's going to be a challenge, right? And the goal is for you to complete whatever the challenge is, whether it's count 3 strides to 4 odd fences, or whether it's count the number on the fence to the stride. So I'd count 1 stride to fence number 1, 2 strides to 2, 3 strides to 3. But the catch is maybe I have to jump all those backwards, right? So I can't start at 1, I have to start at 10. All kinds of wacky, weird challenges. The point being, it just puts us on the hot seat, right? And says like, oh, hey, go do something, right? And that's the part that we don't practice quite as much, is like being on the hot seat, really having to get up and go. And what I can say is like, even in some of my like just, normal around the barn lessons, I make people go and do things, right? Like sometimes I think my students kind of dislike me, right? Because I'm like, nope, just go. Nope, I don't care that you're ready. Go, like, go, just go. Because some of that is just practicing, just do it, right? Like I don't necessarily always have all the time in the world. When I go to my dressage test, there's a time and I need to be coming down the center line or like I'm eliminated, right? The judge is going to ring the bell a second time and like, that's going to be it. Right. And show jumpers are no different, right? Like I go in the ring, I hear the bell, the buzzer, I have X number of seconds. I got to go. Right. I don't get to be like, I'm sorry. Like I need to fix my girth and my left stirrup needs up one hole, please. Like, like room service, like, right. We don't have time. Most of us don't have a groom, but also like, we don't have time for that to happen. And so sometimes just practicing being on the clock and having to go do something, however wacky or zany the challenge might be, makes us practice it and we get better at it. Right.
Sure.
The more we do it, the better we get at it.
Sure, absolutely. I like that. All right. Oh my goodness, girl, you're pursuing a master's degree in clinical mental health because my goodness. Wow. How do you see mental health intersecting with equestrian training? And why is it so important to address the rider's mindset along with their riding skills?
So, unfortunately, fortunately, depending on how you want to see it, we don't ride devoid of our brain, right? Like, I mean, I think a great many of us wish that we could, because you're like, if I could just take my brain out of the equation, I'd be like a brilliant rider. And I think a lot of us would be. But our brains do these really funny things to us, right? Like, one, our brains don't like horses, right? Why? Because horses are fast and unpredictable, right? Our brains are like knitting sounds great, crochet, golf, right? Very slow, very predictable things, right? So just the very act of like getting on a horse is something that our brains automatically kind of go, oh, I'm not so sure, right? Mm-hmm. And then everything after that is another I'm not sure moment. So yeah, in a certain way, like you do have to be, a little bit like different or a little bit not right, like as some riders tell me, like, I don't want to be fixed, right? Like I don't want to see somebody in clinical mental health because I don't want them to fix me, right? Like I don't want them to make me more rational. I need to be less rational to ride better. And in some ways they're sort of not wrong, right? In some ways I can't give in to that like basic part of my like primal brain that says horses are dangerous, right? I have to go, oh no, I'm fine. Go forward. That will fix my problem, right? Because my human brain says, oh no, whoa, like this is bad. We're going fast. No, but like the more I constrain a horse, the more an already afraid horse is going to either blow up or go backwards, right? Like, because the horse's instinct is to do the opposite. The horse's instinct is to flight. So now we're fighting each other, right? And so there is definitely a place to acknowledge mental health. There's definitely a place to acknowledge the rider's state of mind, right? Like if I'm not in a relaxed state of mind, like I'm probably not going to ride very well. Like why? Horses are mirrors. And we all like talk about it. We know, but it's so funny when you like point out to someone that, someone like me, like I talk with my hands quite often. I've learned how to like rein it in. But as a younger person, I talk with my hands out here, the horses were like, like bobbing and weaving, right? Because they're like standing next to me and it's kind of driving them nuts. And like horses are quiet creatures, right? And so, I'm like, but I'm not unrelaxed. I'm just being myself. However, I'm being kind of offensive to my equine partner, right? Like, because I'm really not taking like their reflexes into account. Sure. And so I think like it plays a much bigger role than what a lot of us like to acknowledge, right? But also I think like our generation is changing things, right? And, it used to just be about like, I have one saddle, it'll fit all the horses and like, right. And I'm never going to buy another one. And it's just about my equitation. And realistically, the horse should just do things. And now we don't think that way at all. Right. And that's like within my lifetime. Saddles should fit the horse. They should probably be more fitted to a specific horse, right? Like maybe wool is better than foam. Maybe for some things, foam is better. Like we're so much more thoughtful about the way in which we train horses. So to me, like the natural progression is to say, I'm more thoughtful about the way I train myself. Right. And that like, I want to find a trainer who maybe, not all of us are pursuing master's degrees. And I don't think we have to, but just a trainer who cares enough about it to get a clinician in like a Dan Stewart or myself who does care about those things and who does know those things and can help. Or maybe a trainer who just understands that like, look, I don't understand the why, but I can tell you that, all the hand things are really making your horse anxious. Sure. Right. Like, and just point it out. And I think a lot of trainers are capable of doing that. It's just sort of been not something that, I mean, certainly when I was learning to teach, it wasn't something I was taught to focus on. And it was something I had to kind of learn to incorporate into my teaching. And then I found other people like Dan Stewart who were like focusing on those things. And I was like, oh, this is where I want to be, right? This is what I'm interested in. This is really where I want to be. I want to help riders and horses come together and find the middle ground where they make the magic, not just make one or the other really, really good.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense. Absolutely. I laugh when you talk about the big hand
Yeah.
gestures and that,
Yeah.
because when we observe horses when they're out together, right? They cue each other with the subtlest of
They do.
expression, an ear that moves a tiny little bit, and then there's us in
Right,
life, and
right.
they're like, "Whoa!"
Right, right. And it's just a little overwhelming, I think, if you're a horse, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of people, like, I certainly didn't mean it, and I think a great many people don't mean it. They just don't realize, like, hey, I'm not
Right.
speaking horse very well.
Right. Right. They have to develop that awareness. You know, I'm a way more in tuned equestrian and horseman than I was. You know, I started riding at the age of 4, you know, had a big riding stable, and I'm so much different with how I connect to my horses now and how I conduct myself and the breathing when I get out of my car and I show up at the facility, and I just do some, you know, if I'm carrying the day's anxiety and stress, I have to discharge it before I share that with the horse community, right?
I mean, I talk a lot about that to my clients, especially my adult clients, about like whatever I have, whether it's like my grocery list or like my stress from work, or I just ran to get here because I have exactly an hour between, getting off of work, getting to here, and then having to pick my kid up at soccer or whatever it is. It's like I have to find a way to like let it go and be present, or it doesn't work as well, right? Like, and whatever that is, like, I mean, I've told people to do everything from like, go use the porta john twice, like, and just be like, I'm gonna like relieve stress and tension that way, or like I'm gonna walk around the barn 3 times, or like, because like not everyone can sit in their car and breathe. Like some people can, and they've gotten to that point, but other people are like, it's totally overwhelming. And so it's like, oh, just go for a long walk then. Like, just like get it out though, and like be ready
Right.
here, because any of that stress and anxiety that bubbles over in us, like ultimately kind of bubbles right over into them. um and then you're kind of starting from a disadvantaged icky spot, right? Not to mention, like, if it's my horse and I'm the one who sees that horse a majority of the time, then all of a sudden, like, I'm not a super fun friend to hang out with, right? Like, very quickly I kind of become the enemy, not the not the ally. um and I want to be the fun friend, right? Like, it's like I want to be that one that you want to come over and see in the field,
Right.
not the friend that you look at and go, I better move away from the hay pile real quick. Right? Like,
Yeah. Why won't
association
my
is
horse let me
everything.
catch him?
Right.
Hmm.
And you get a lot of that, right? Like, especially like if you're at a big boarding stable or big lesson stable, there's a whole lot of that, because there's a certain handful of people that turn the horses in and out and feed them. And often it's not the lesson student, it's not the owner, right? It's somebody else. And so, that horse will run up to, whomever feeds them, and gladly greet them, whoever brings them in to eat, like, but the owner, no dice.
Here she comes.
Right. Or, any kid that smells like a lesson kid, they're like, oh, like, saw that
Or
come, head down, right? Like, but yet I can walk over and catch them if I don't have anyone in tow, right? Because they're like, oh, this isn't going to be so bad. Like, we're going to do something, then I'm going to come back, like, whatever. So I think, any perceived stress or friction on their end, right, makes them kind of go, I don't know, that might be hard. And, honestly, we're no different on that level. Like, it doesn't take much friction for us to go, that seems hard. Right. Like, whether it's not having enough time or having a lot of time and being like, oh, I'm going to procrastinate. like,
yeah.
all of those things create things that make things hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey, Oh my goodness. Many, many riders struggle with performance anxiety in competition, of course. What are some of the most common mental blocks that you see in riders? And what strategies do you recommend to help them overcome those challenges?
So the strategy for everyone is a little unique, right? Like there are some like blanket things that we can do that are certainly never going to hurt or like cause harm, but the way that everyone ultimately I think finds their coping mechanism is kind of their own, right? Like whatever that is, right? For some people it's like practice practice practice. For other people it's like, okay, I've come up with this really great pre-show ritual. This is what I do every time. This is how I find my flow state. I need to do this thing and then I'm fine, right? And I believe like if I do this thing I'm always okay. um but in terms of like the top mental blocks, if you will, um, a lot of people experience, especially riders of a certain age and older, right, experience the fear of like harm and humiliation, right? Because, when I'm like 5, 8, 10, right? I bounce when I hit the ground. Like, I don't know how worried about it I am, right? Like, I don't know what a broken femur is because I don't know what a femur is, right? Like I don't know that I can even break it, probably, right? But I know once I'm 55 that I can break my femur, and maybe I actually already have, and it really hurts, right? And so that's like a legitimate fear. And those are the ones that are the hardest to overcome, right? Because it's really rational, right? Like I'm in my right mind to say riding horses at the horse show over fences I've never seen before can be really scary because my horse might stop and I might fall off and break something. Well, that's true, right? And that's something that as riders we have to square with. And whether you square with that via practice and saying like my horse and I are very well practiced, therefore like I know that this is no big deal, that like this is a walk in the park. Like some people, and I was one of them, like I used to have to school, a hole higher than what I'd show, and then everything looked small when I got to the show, right? Everything was like walk in the park, piece of cake, like you've got this, right? Some people, that's like not good enough, right? Like I need that. Plus, I need a breathing ritual, like for the truck and the trailer. And then I need to be left alone for 10 minutes with my horse and we need to like breathe together. And then I really would prefer the schooling ring to be sort of empty-ish. So that way, like I can do my thing, like on my time, on my terms, and like not have to deal with traffic and not interrupt my flow state, right? Other people are like, no, I do better with a whole lot of distractions, right? So I'm not in my own brain thinking about it. Some people rock a really great playlist and they're like, okay, I'm just going to like put my earbuds in and center in on myself and shut the world out. There are all kinds of coping strategies, right? That range a great deal from like breath work to like my security coach, right? Like I just can't do it without this person talking to me, right? And all of them are valid, right? Like none of them are wrong if they work for you. It's just really about being willing to say like, look, I'm going to try some stuff and not be super hard on myself if it doesn't work or it doesn't work the first time, like, right? Or maybe a playlist is a strong idea for me, but I just need different songs on my playlist. Like some people put really jazzy songs on their playlist, right? And they're like getting the party started with Pink when like, well, I'm kind of an anxious, nervous, energy high person anyway. Like maybe I needed some Enya on there to kind of like chill it out, right? But the playlist was a really good idea. I just didn't quite have the right music on there. So the littlest things, I think what I've learned have made a huge difference for different people. And so I think it is kind of much like training the horse. It's saying, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to change one thing in a meaningful way and see what happens. And patience with yourself. Like showing is hard. Like the idea that we can or should just be able to take a horse to a horse show and that horse should just like go around 12 some fences and be honest and brave and get all their flying lead changes is like that's a lot of stuff, right? But like somehow as riders, we lose sight of like that's a lot of stuff. And like just getting off the trailer at the horse show and not being the person like screaming and yelling, he's mine, like as your horse has run away from you and taken off bucking at the horse show, right? Because that's also real. Like it's happened to all of us at some point. Like we've been the person at the horse show with the green horse who takes off bucking because somebody let a paper bag like loose or whatever, right? And it's so silly and it's like mortifying, right? But like we've all been there. And I think that's the another thing that riders think like I'm the only one that this ever happens to. And the answer is like you are not the only person who has ever like had a loose horse at a horse show. You're not the only person who's ever gotten bucked off at the horse show. Like you're not the only person to get eliminated for going off course. Like these things have happened to plenty of equestrians before you, and they will continue to happen to plenty of other equestrians. And you're not alone. Right. And it's like, and nobody's really like, that was a huge realization in my own career that nobody's really paying that much attention to you. Right. Like most of the people who are at the horse show are like there for themselves or a loved one. Like if you're not their loved one, they're like barely paying attention, right? And I used to like have this huge fear of spectators until I finally realized that like literally no one cared. Like right, like, and I can't remember exactly when that occurred to me. I was like in my mid 20s, but you know, I think I like looked around at a big classic and was like, wait a second, like this is a high dollar class. And I'm like looking around at a bunch of people. There was like a rail delay and the grounds crew had to come out. And I was just kind of hanging out, waiting for the judge to like sound the horn. And I'm like hanging out and I'm like looking around and all these people like heads down, reading books, like nobody's watching. Right. And it has nothing to do with like, I finally realized like, oh, it has nothing to do with the buzzer. Right. Like, it's just that they actually really are not that tuned into what I'm doing or what clothes I'm wearing or whether I'm on the correct or incorrect lead or any of these other things. Like, nobody's actually really judging me this way. And that's another big one is fear of judgment, right? Be it from a judge or peers or whomever, right? Loved one. Letting people down is a big one. So there are some like big categories of like, hey, you know, these things bother people in general when they're out in public doing things in front of other people. But they're not necessarily beyond like harm and humiliation exclusive to riding. I mean, and even harm and humiliation exists in other sports. But I think there's some comfort just in knowing that like you're not the only one. Right. I think some people just need to hear like you're not the only one, get over yourself, right? And then they're like, oh yeah, I'm okay. Like, and then they move right on. Like right. But I think for a lot of us, those fears are more deep seated. And then it is about finding the coping mechanism that works for you.
Sure. Sure. As a gestaltist, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
Whole,
right.
whole bunch.
It's meaningful changes.
So you've done liberty work with
Yeah.
horses, which is all about developing a deep, deep trust and connection. How does liberty work improve the overall partnership between horse and rider? And can any rider incorporate liberty work into their training? And do you suggest that maybe they give that a try too?
I think the answer on a very basic level is yes. Like we can all use a certain amount of liberty work, right? Even if it's liberty work on its like most foundational level on a lead line with a halter, right? Like I can still be trying, like striving to work at liberty. I can certainly be working on my connection, but I don't necessarily like need a round pen, you know, need to have an arena with knee deep footing so my horse can lay down and rear safely and all these other things, right? Like I can just make it really simple and like literally do it in my backyard and say, you know, okay, I'm going to use a halter and a lead shank. And I'm just going to work on my connection and work on my timing and say, like, when I go, you go. When I will, you will. Right. Or when I go left, you go left. When I go right, you go right. Like, you know, this is my bubble. Once I start pushing into yours, you need to move over. Right. Like, and that's a form of liberty work. And honestly, it's how a lot of it starts. Right. And so, and then from there, like every rider can make their own decision about, do I want to go farther with it or not? And do I need other things to go farther with it or not? I know plenty of people who have started very successfully in grass round pens in the middle of their paddocks and things like that, because they weren't even sure like how badly they wanted to do it. Right. And so why am I investing in, all this stuff? Like just start simple. Right. Halter and a lead shank. And I do think it benefits all of us. I think it makes so many riders especially who start in like big lesson programs, which is where a majority of us start, right? We kind of like tote around the horse in this like awkward way that doesn't really acknowledge the horse at all, right? It's like, oh, they're supposed to follow me on the lead shank. Okay, but like, where does that really come from, right? And it really comes from a place of connection. It's just that in lesson programs, there's not like time or bandwidth to really be teaching this, right? Like it's not the lesson program's fault. It's like, no, like their job was to teach you how to like tack up a horse. Their job was to teach you how to walk, trot, and canter, like, and some very like functional basics. And then beyond that, like it's on us as horsemen to say like, okay, how do I go a little further? How do I do a little bit better? Sure, the connection piece, that's how I do better. And the connection piece is something I use Liberty Work a great deal with my clients, especially ones who are perhaps struggling to make a comeback, right? Or someone who might be struggling with a little bit of anxiety or uncertainty regarding their horse, even if it's a lesson horse. I find Liberty Work to be really helpful. And the reason why is it makes us so much more present. It makes us so much more aware of how the horse is communicating, because realistically, the horse does a lot of communicating. But like we said earlier, like one little flick of an ear or one bat of an eyelash, and like they've communicated a whole lot to their like pony pals. But to us, they've done nothing at all, because we're looking for this grand like display when it's like, okay, really, you don't want the grand display. Like by the time your lesson horse gets to the grand display, which would be I've kicked out and taken off bucking, that's not so good. Like, right. Like, but I guarantee you that same horse has pinned its ear back a couple of times, or has kind of like given you the hairy eyeball over his shoulder a few times, right? Or has swished his tail and kind of arched his back some and been a little cranky. It's just we missed it. And I think Liberty Work helps us key into things that are helpful. So I can sit there and say to myself, you know what, I feel insecure for a reason. And the reason why is my horse seems very unhappy. How can I fix that? Right. Or actually, my insecurities are pretty unfounded right now. My horse seems very relaxed. Right. Like, and so maybe I should just like go with him or her. Right. And say, hey, like Fluffy is fine. Why am I not fine? But then I have real tools to make that decision, as opposed to kind of making it based on my own human feelings, which sometimes aren't really an accurate reflection of my partner.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm sitting here taking it all in. I can picture moments with my horse, and moments where didn't even miss the cue. I saw it happen. And then where we ended up was my fault, because she tried to communicate with me and I totally kind of just bypassed it. And until she said, no, I really meant that. Remember earlier when I was in the cross ties and you were tacking me up and I pinned my ears when you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And we're all guilty. I mean, I think us horse women have all been raised by women and on some level that, have said, you're fine, it's fine, keep going. Like, right. And we have a lot of that in us. And I think sometimes that feeling of like, you're fine, it's fine, like sometimes you do need to push through some things, right? Sometimes there needs to be an element of everything's fine, like let's just keep going. But also sometimes there's a moment, like you're saying, to listen and go, oh wait, maybe I should like pause and figure out if continuing here is the right step.
There you go.
And
she taught me that lesson. She taught me that lesson. When I went over her head and landed on the ground, I'm like, I am so sorry. You tried to warn me. You tried to warn me and I ignored it. And I had the thought, I'm like, you know what? Today would be the day. Don't ride with your spurs on. And I meant to take them off, and I like totally just, she was ovulating. She was going into estrus. She was
Oh,
very,
no.
very sensitive, right? And it was just a little roll with my spurs.
And
And
she
she
was
said,
like,
I told you.
I'll squeeze you right back.
And she did too. I got those spurs off so fast. And then, of course, I had to get back on and do it right, right? Give her the
Right. Yeah.
opportunity to not throw me again and for us to
Yeah.
do a nice jog around the arena. And we were like, okay, we're all good now. And I apologized to her. I'm like, I am sorry. I totally forgot to take my spurs off. And she let me know, and I don't blame her. Oh my gosh. So let's get into some cross training for equestrians.
Oh,
Boy,
all right.
you are amazing though, like how many things you're involved with when it comes to fitness activities, because you have been involved in a variety of
A
activities.
lot of them.
Yeah, from ballroom dancing, like here we are over here with ballroom dancing, all the way to surfing. What?
I mean, listen, you would be surprised how many parallels there are in ballroom dancing to horses, really. I
This
mean,
is true, right?
both have a partner,
Partnership.
both are outrageously expensive, both, both require a great deal of investment, a lot of travel, a lot of time, right? So honestly, and I know a couple of judges, actually USDF judges, that are ballroom dancers, and love it. And because it's all, a lot of it's the same: connection, partnership, rhythm, and timing. Like, a lot of those fundamentals are the same. The way that we're expressing them is a little different. But they're really very similar. So,
Sure. But do you think cross training is important for
yes,
equestrians? Okay.
yes. And here's why. We start getting better at things when we start making connections, right? And so while I may not ever surf pipeline in Hawaii, right? Like, I probably won't. I have really crappy shoulders at this point. Right? Like, I can still take lessons from my surfing and go, oh, you know what? Like, when I surf, every time this left foot is always a little too far ahead of me, and it is when I ride too, right? Like, that whole
Mm-hmm.
side of my body just rushes a little ahead of myself. Or I can start picking up on patterns about the way that, I get nervous and I hold on to my partner like a buoy in a storm. And maybe, like, that's not very nice to Paul or Ralph, like, who I'm dancing with. And then that makes them kind of not dance the same way. Right. And so now we're like hanging on each other, and we're earthbound, as a dressage judge would say, right? Like, instead of being nice and light and floating across the floor, because, like, I started this weird cycle of, like, help me, right? Like hold me, help me, protect me, right? And we do that with our horse too. Like, I know I do that with my horse. Like, I'm like, okay, like, I'm just gonna, neurotically pet you like a cat, right? It used to annoy my dance partner to, like, right? Like, I mean, I'd be like waiting with him for things, and I'd just be like stroking him. So I'm not weird. Don't do that. Like, not a good social suggestion, right? But it wasn't until he pointed it out that I realized, like, I used to twirl my horse's mane right at the wither, like somebody who had, like, taken way too many ADHD drugs before the horse show. And that honestly annoyed some of my horses. Like, some of them clearly didn't care, but some of them were clearly like, why are you touching me like this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just want to walk around, like, stop doing this thing. And so I think, but they can also point out really positive things, that, like, I'm the ultimate empath, right? And so, like, if my partner is feeling a little bit like down or sore or whatever, like, I'm the person who's going to be like, oh gosh, okay, this is what we should do instead, right? So I tend to be very aware that way, right? And sometimes hyper aware to the point that, like, it can be non-beneficial. But other positive things I've learned about myself are that, like, I have really good rhythm and timing, right? Like, I learned that through dance. I learned that through surfing. I learned that through hang gliding, right? I didn't necessarily on the nose learn that through riding. And so I think any way in which we can push our body outside of its comfort zone, learn to move differently, learn to be more ambidextrous, learn to use ourselves differently is super good. Whatever it is, whether it's swimming or tennis or field hockey, lacrosse, anything, right? But as riders, we have to be these nimble, ambidextrous tigers that I think a lot of folks don't think we really actually have to be. Like I have to be mentally strong. I have to be willing to shift at any given moment. I have to be able to do two different things with two different hands, two different things with two different legs, probably all at the same time. Right. And so playing another sport, doing something else, yes, like wildly beneficial. Also because like, you know, we don't run a lot as equestrians. I'm a terrible runner. I hate running, which is why I ride the horse. But, you know, having a little bit of cardiovascular fitness in your life won't hurt your riding. It'll make it easier. And like, if it's fun, then you'll actually do it. But like, if I have to run on the treadmill, I'm not going to do it. So playing tennis is probably a better, more fun way to get that done. Right. So yeah, I always advocate in that direction. It's not going to hurt you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm a mountain biker and I paddle board,
There you go.
I find all those things quite helpful to riding. And you've been involved in many, many different sports throughout your life. Can you share with our audience what some of your biggest life lessons have been, what you've learned through these athletic pursuits, and how those lessons apply to riding?
So one of the big ones came from hang gliding. And it came from I learned to hang glide before I could drive a car. So 13-year-old girl pilots are not exactly a huge demographic, as luck would have it. And so I had a lot of people who I would say weren't necessarily in my corner. Right. You know, I was definitely not the archetypical pilot. Most pilots can drive a car at least, you know, before they pilot a hang glider. So that was very atypical. Some people like straight up didn't want to work with me, right? Like, because I'm a girl and I don't drive yet. Like, so this is crazy. Like, wait a couple of years, come back kind of thing. You know, and one of the biggest lessons I learned is that, you know, there are certain people who will be in your corner and there are people who are not necessarily your biggest fans. Just because someone's not your biggest fan doesn't necessarily automatically make them your enemy. But also like learn to lean on the people who are in your corner and it's okay. Right. Like, I think like I kind of thought I had to do it. Like I had to be this island and I had to do it all by myself. And it wasn't until I went to compete for the very first time as a hang glider pilot. And I felt so alone and so terrified. And I'm this like little girl amongst like grown men. Like, the whole thing was like looking back and I'm like, holy moly, like, why did I do that?
Good
And
for
I
you.
did it because I wanted to, right? But like I wanted to cry, you know, because I was like, I was terrified and like, what if I messed up? And then there was this team part of the competition that was just sort of for fun, right? But it was like every picking teams in gym class. And they needed someone with like the lowest possible hang rating, which was like me at that point, right? And I was the first pick on like a really good team. And all of a sudden I realized like, one, these people were going to be in my corner no matter what. But like when I walked over to them to like go do the like little team part of this event, what I realized was they were like, no, like we really want you because you're really good and you can do it. And I was like, wow. And I think sometimes like just being able to hear from someone else that they believe in you. It could be anyone. It could be your mom. It could be your boyfriend. It could be a sibling or a friend or just someone who rides at your barn, right? But like hearing that someone genuinely believes you can do it is a really big deal. And it went really well, right? It was actually really fun after that. But until that moment, I hadn't actually let myself have any fun. I had only been stressed about like, what is the perception of me because the spotlight's on me because I'm different. And I think we've all been in that position somewhere at some point, and that's really hard, right? But learning who your allies are and learning who's in your corner and how to lean on them is an important lesson. The second one also comes from hang gliding. My longtime hang gliding coach, the Dune man, always used to say, just keep on trucking. Like when all else fails, just keep running, pull in and keep running, pull in and keep running. And I think it's the same in horses. When all else fails, just go forward. Like when all else fails, just go forward. Keep going, go forward, keep on trucking, keep on running. And it's worked. It's gotten me through like everything in life. From hang gliding to horses to like life to everything, right? Like, because I think a lot of this time as humans, we get real analytical and like caught up in the past and what's already behind us, but like it's already in the past, it's done. Move on, like go forward, move on, let it go. Like the rail is down. No amount of willing it back up or self-loathing is going to magically make it levitate back into the cups. Like it's over. Just keep going and do the best you can. Like make the best of it, the rest of it, the best of it, right? Like that's all I can do. I cannot will it back into those cups. So that's a going forward process. So I think that's like some of the best advice I've ever gotten in my entire life. The dude man knows who he is if he's listening. You know, and it had a huge impact on my life in like the most positive way. So I think like, you know, the third lesson there is for coaches, like you never know when you're going to say something to a 13-year-old kid that will get them through the rest of their life. And it may not be the most profound advice ever about horseback riding, like, right. It may be something like keep on trucking that just like sticks with them. And all of a sudden they like apply it to everything. Just go forward, just keep running, just keep swimming, whatever it is, right? Like all of those are in essence similar. But you just don't know what you're going to say to someone and have it really stick, positive or negative. So I try to like remember that as things come out of my mouth, that you never know what is seared into someone's brain for a lifetime. You hope it's good.
Clearly it has. The just keep trucking. You are a
Yeah.
testament to that. I love it. All right. Thank you for that inspiration. I do love it. I don't think much stops you. You are a real go-getter.
I am, but there are things I like everyone, I have speed bumps. You know, and then I just remember to keep on trucking and you know, that's what happens. But you know, I do think like learning to have a dory, just keep swimming, like memory is sometimes a good thing, right? Because it allows us to let go of the things that are less than, right? Like, you know, hold on to the things that make you feel good, but the things that don't, like, there's no use in perseverating over them, you know, like, and that is just learning to shed that and say like, you know, yeah, that was a crappy day, whatever, done.
Onward, right?
Yeah.
Love it. So many of your coaching clients are young riders and they're just starting out in competition. Boy, you know a thing or two about that. What advice would you give to parents and young riders about managing their expectations so that they can foster a healthy and positive approach to competing?
So one of the things that I tell parents all the time, because like kids, whether they admit it or not, they want to please their parents. Like, and believe me, like your kid knows how much you're spending on this horse show, right? Like, because you've said it 8,000 times, you know, like, and, you know, the 7 things you didn't get to this weekend because you spent all day Saturday and all day Sunday at a horse show. Like, they are aware of the investment level because it's also their investment level too, right? You know, and they may not be the one writing the check. And while, you know, letting kids know about money is totally like well and good. The like my big thing for kids, because I know it's how I felt, right, is that like all I wanted to do was please my parents, right? Like whether it was in the horse show arena or at school, you know, like I wanted to make them proud of me. I wanted to make them happy. And so like the best advice I have is like to not be another person who judges your kid, right? Like don't make them feel judged, right? Make them feel accepted, meet them where they're at, like be their cheerleader. Don't be one more person who says like, well, I think you could have done better. I mean, unless you really feel like your kid didn't show up today, right? Like they were distracted, they broke up with their boyfriend last week, and like they were fighting with Tiffany, who's also on the team, and then they were kind of a punk about it. You know, then there may be a time to say like, hey, did you really do your best today? But for the most part, I would say, like, if your kid has a pre-show playlist, like, don't make fun of the songs on it. Right? Like, even if you don't like them, like, if you don't like Miley Cyrus and The Climb, I hear you. um it's not my favorite either, but there are a lot of people who love that song and it makes them feel really good. And
Yeah.
so, like, let them have it, and just, like, put your earplugs in and find your zen for a minute and just let them listen to it and don't judge it. Right. Don't make fun of it. Don't let little brother make fun of it. Right. Like leave them alone. Like, they're doing their thing. And then another piece of it is to say, like, I loved getting to watch you ride, like, learning phrases like that. Not, I loved watching you win. Right. Or because then it puts too much emphasis on winning. Right. I loved watching you ride. I loved watching you do something you love. I loved watching you have fun. Right. Like, all of those things are really positive messages. Right. But anything else kind of comes off a little too, like, sofa couchy, and backyard coachy, and kind of like, oh gosh, mom's always on me about my diagonal, and like, she wouldn't be able to do it if she rode. Like, I mean, my mom was not a rider, right? Like, but yet, my mom could tell me when my horse was happy or not. And she was
Oh.
probably right. You know what I mean? The honest answer is she spends a lot of time watching. I'm sure she was right. Parents do learn some things in these lessons when they sit there for hours and hours and hours on end and watch and watch and watch. And obviously that was a time pre-smartphone. So, she was either reading a book or watching, and I'm sure she did pick up a thing or two. But, sometimes I think it's better if parents are parents and coaches are coaches, and parents focus on, like, hey, is this what my kid loves? And like, supporting them in finding what their passions are and what they love, as opposed to influencing what the passions are so much, or what they maybe aren't, because, like, mom does ride and mom knows some things, and likes to be the couch quarterback and call the shots. And I can say, as a kid, I would not have liked that. Like, and it's probably part of why horses, because my mom was never like that. Right. Like, I mean, I've always loved animals and horses, but my mom didn't really have a whole lot of ground to stand on against my coaches when they were like, I think we should do this. Okay. Sounds reasonable enough. So I think that makes a big difference sometimes. But definitely, I love getting to watch you ride. That's the easiest sentence on the face of the planet. And that's really the only one you need.
Sure. That is sage advice as a mom uh who had well, my eldest daughter showed, so we were both
Oh,
showing. So I was her coach and her mother,
woo.
but she also was in the Hartford Skating League. She figure skated. So that's where I was no longer the coach. And now that I reflect back on that, I am pretty happy that I stayed out of it, because that was just not my lane at all.
Yeah, right.
I couldn't even stand up on skates, never mind do what she was doing, right? But
No.
I have to say, I mean, I did. Wow. Wow. Now you're going to have me, like, reflecting all night tonight about back in the
Did I
show
wrong my
days.
kid? And
I was at I remember one time coming out of a really good class on my quarter horse, and I came out, and my daughter was at the gate as I came through, and I hadn't placed. And she looked up at me. She was so little then. She was like 6 years old. She's like, "Mommy, why are you smiling? You didn't win anything, you know?" And took that moment to share with her that I knew I had a good ride, and that didn't matter.
brilliant.
So that was that. Yeah, I'm
I,
so grateful that I had the wherewithal because that is how I felt. I knew my ride was
uh,
like, mwah,
right.
but I was also riding a Palomino. And I see sometimes some judges
This,
don't want color in their class, you know?
right. And that happens. And sometimes, like, the reality of winning and losing is that we just get beat. Like, right. Like, sometimes, like, we ride our best ride. There's, I come out of the arena, my coach says to me, what would you do differently? And I'm like, nothing. And they're like, yeah, I wouldn't change much either. It's just that there were 6 people who were faster. So that's really unfortunate if you're a
Right.
jumper. And sometimes that just really is the case. It's like, no, I don't think I would have cut that turn more. I don't think I would have tried to save time there because I liked the line I took. Like, and it was me. Okay, maybe it was a little too conservative up against the people who knocked, 2 seconds off my time. But, in the grand scheme of things, when you're thinking about a couple of seconds, I mean, for the great majority of us, I'm going to say like a couple of seconds is like not worth complaining about, is not worth dying over, and is not worth being upset about, especially if we had a really good ride.
Correct.
It's like there's a certain very top percentage of us that it's like, no, if I'm Boyd Martin, those seconds mean something, right? Like,
right.
But I think for the great majority of us, like, who are just out to have the time of our lives and to sometimes just survive it, not even have the time of our life, but I just want to survive it, and afterwards I will have had the time of my life. Like, there's a lot of power in just acknowledging my really good ride or my really good effort, right? Like it may not have been good for just anyone, right? Like, but by my standards, I overcame a lot today. And I think that that's a really important thing to recognize, especially for young riders. Like, if, there's a young rider out there who's really struggling with the group hack canter, because it goes fast and there are lots of ponies, and, oh gosh, I've got to do it, and I've got to steer, and I've got to look over my shoulder to make sure I'm not cutting someone else off. And like, there's a lot going on if you're 10 in a group pack, right? There's a lot of things to juggle, and that's a lot of responsibility for a little kid. Like, that kid doesn't drive yet either, right? They haven't learned like right of way yet. Like, half of those kids barely know left and right? So right. So it's like miraculous that these kids like make it around and do so well. And so if you sort of sit there and think about it that way, right, and then go, oh wait, like, today the goal was really just not to break from the canter, to steer around other riders, and I did that today. Okay, I don't know if it matters that I didn't get a ribbon, right? Like, because the goal wasn't to win a ribbon, right? The goal was to not break from the canter, and I did that. So that's like ice cream sundae worthy, right?
Absolutely. For me, it was, I felt that we just had a splendid ride, and I was thrilled with that. And that's what counted for me.
I think it's what counts for a lot of us. It's just that we live in a world where we need proof, like, well, how did you place? Like, like, and I don't know why, right? But I think, and, it's totally part of my coaching code seminar, like, celebrate your little victories. Like, what are your little victories? And, that's certainly a little victory. Like, right? Like, hey, I thought I had a really good ride and I wouldn't have changed anything about it. Super. Go get a steak. Like,
what's better than that?
Wine.
Yes.
Right. Like, and celebrate it and hold on to it. Like, just because I didn't get a ribbon doesn't make it less valid.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Yeah. It's about enjoying the ride. All right, we're going to get back into your ballroom dancing because you have a background in ballroom and social dance. Social dance?
So social dancing is really cool and it's really fun, especially if you compete at it, right? Because it's just partner dancing, right? Like, so Argentine tango, Lindy Hop, those would be examples of social dances, right? They have been codified like West Coast and East Coast swing for ballroom, under like the dance sport header, but also they're kind of their own communities. And what's really fun about them is that, unlike in a lot of ballroom, salsa would also be a really good example of that. Unlike in a lot of ballroom where we choreograph things, right, and we study them and perfect them and go back over them and over them and over them, social dancing is really defined more by the lead follow component, right? And this extemporaneous component that I don't know what my leader is going to ask of me as a follower. But I'm just going to follow it, right? And do my best and interpret what it is that the leader is saying. And to me, this is highly important for horseback riders, right? Because one, knowing both how to lead a little bit and follow, right? I've put myself in both positions, right? Like, the follower in a lot of ways is kind of the horse, right? The horse doesn't necessarily know what I'm going to ask next, right? And often, like, riders write quite a bit about that eager beaver horse that, like, starts cantering before A, or, you know, wants to like make the courtesy circle always at this end of the arena, or wants to suck to the center line and get there to halt and be done, or whatever it is, right? But realistically, like all that is kind of an anxious horse that's anticipating what's going to happen. And in a lot of ways, what I found of myself is that I'm quite an anxious horse. Like I am a very good follower. I'm very on top of things, and I am very good at interpreting even the slightest like lead or suggestion or notion of available space for myself to take. But often, right, the hardest thing for me to do is wait, right? Like wait for the full cue, right? Because maybe at the end of that, there's something a little different, right? And so what I really found was like, hey, how could I be a much better leader? Right? Like, how can I make the horse that is anxious feel so much more comfortable? Like, what qualities do I like in a leader? Right? Like, I like leaders who are very forgiving. I also like leaders who are so willing to pause, right? Like, they don't just keep going, hey, that's not what I wanted. Keep going, keep going. They just wait. Right, like, and let me do whatever it was that I was going to make up and self lead, and you know, and there's just like, that was very nice, now can we dance together again? Like, you know, and in a lot of ways, like with the horses, that's gotten me really far, right? Like you just let the mare who knows how to do it do her thing, and then you're like, okay, are we ready to do this together now? Perfect. Like, you know, like, but if I try to stop her, she's like, oh my God, and they touched me and they squeezed me and I didn't want, they told me things like, right. And now I've created this like scenario in which I had a battle when I didn't need to have a battle. I could have just like let her do it, not rewarded it. I don't have to tell her she was a good girl. She wasn't, you know, but I don't have to punish her either. I don't have to get after her. And I don't have to continue to ruffle her by asking, asking, asking. Just wait. Okay, fine.
Sure.
Are you ready
I
now?
used to do that with, yeah. I can remember times where I would just, you know, I'd be asking for a departure. It wasn't coming. And I'm like, you know what? We're just going to sit here and get frustrated, and that's not going to help anyone. And a lot of times I'll just bring that horse back into its stall, not untack it, and just let it have a timeout just to sit and chill and whatever. And I'd go work another horse, and then I'd go grab that one again, get on. If I didn't want to battle, but I needed it to end on a good note, then I would ask for something that I knew it could,
Exactly.
you know, execute perfectly. And we could say, good boy or good girl, and be done, right? Because it
Yeah.
was like, I am not in the mood to battle, and it doesn't get
No,
us anywhere anyway. So let's just do it this way. I have other things to do. We'll get back to it. And it really created a better partnership.
I think it does. I think, you know, not being in constant good cop, bad cop mode too also does. Like there, we do have this ability to be neither positive or negative and to just simply accept something and move on. Like, you know, and not be like totally neutral about it. That wasn't what I wanted, but it wasn't bad. Like, you know, and what's funny about it is oftentimes when they choreograph their own dressage test, it's quite lovely. Like, right? Like, I mean, you get beautiful transitions, like, you know, they're always collected, like it's magical, right? And you're like, wow, I feel awesome though, because I didn't ask for any of it. Like, if we could just harness that together, we'd really be cooking with gas and I'd win a gold medal. But you know, lo and behold, it doesn't always happen that way. But it's like one, you know, I sometimes tell people take a certain amount of comfort in the fact you know your horse can do it, right? Like they've shown you they can do it. So now you know, right? Now it's just about figuring out how to do it together better. And that's not the worst thing ever, right? That's just about figuring out how to be a better leader and a better proposer and a better asker, right? And like that's a never ending battle. Like none of us will ever be perfect askers, you know, like we're just always going to get better at it. And so that's a worthwhile pursuit to me as a student of riding, to say I'm gonna just try to be a better asker. Sure.
Love it. Oh my gosh. That is so well said. Totally on board with that. Absolutely. Kathy, we're winding this up with one last question for you. But what I would like to share with our viewers is that if they want to contact you, there
Yeah.
is a QR code right by your head in this video. And all you have to do, viewers, is point your camera at that, scan that code, and it'll take you to Kathy's website and you can contact her that way.
Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome.
All the
Yeah.
good technology.
No, I love it. It's a lot sometimes for this old person, but I'm getting there. So, Kathy, we want to know what's next for Coach Kathy because you have accomplished so much already as a coach, an athlete, and a mental health advocate. So, what's next on your journey, and what projects or goals are you most excited about in the coming year since we're fairly early
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
year?
we're fairly early into the new year. So I'm very excited about moving and having a new brick and mortar facility where hopefully I can host more clinics and I can do more things that are really specific to this vein, as opposed to kind of like weaving them into other things and kind of trying to like secretly dose people. I can just be more on the nose about it and say, this is what I'm doing. Please come, have a good time. So that's really exciting. And then for myself personally, I'd like to really focus this year on some of my own competing. It's been a long time since I've really been able to do that. And last year I tried, but I didn't get as much focus at it as I really wanted. And then I had some really bad luck with some lameness, and that just like really made it hard. And we all know what that looks like. So I'm hoping that this year, knock on wood, I have much better luck with lameness, but also that I can get out there and finish my L program and my scores for my L program for USDF, and that I can really start digging into more of the International Liberty Horse Association competitions, because I like got my feet wet last year, but in like the most baby teeny tiny kind of way. And now I like really want to go try and make a whole bunch of mistakes and learn from them and figure out what I can do better. And you know, be able to help my clients figure out how to do better, because I mean the International Liberty Horse Association is so cool because it's in its infancy and they're learning and growing and evolving, like, and you know, I can't say a ton of us really have a whole lot of experience showing at Liberty, because I think they've only been around 5 or 6 years, right? So it's like, right, like, and so I'd like to be able to guide people, but you know, I think until you've kind of done it a little bit yourself, it's really hard to know how to steer people in the right direction. And so I'd like to have a bunch of those experiences for myself, so I can hopefully help inspire other people to go join that bandwagon and say, hey, like, you can recognize Liberty as a discipline, you can compete at it. And you don't necessarily have to ride your horse, that it's totally valid to have a horse and not ride. Because I think that's another important message. You know, just because I don't wish to ride my horse anymore, or even if I'm 8 and riding's overwhelming, but handling them on the ground is not, there's something for you out there. You know, horses can be for everyone and meet you where you're at. And I think that's one of the things I love the most about horses is their accepting nature about meeting people where they're at, mirroring people where they're at. And I think, you know, being able to show at Liberty is just such a cool opportunity to utilize horses in such a different way. You know, and it's such an underrepresented way, really, at this point still. So that's what I'm really excited about. That's what's on the horizon for me. And then of course, clinics and things like that. I don't want to give that up. Because it's so much fun. I meet incredible people, and, you know, most of the time people who want to learn about how they can mentally do better are really incredible folks. And they're a pleasure to work with usually. And we have so much fun, and there's so many laughs and so many brain farts and so many brain triumphs. So those are the things I'm looking forward to: clinics, new brick and mortar, and some competing of my own.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. Kathy, thank you so very much for being a part of our program. And I will definitely reach out to you in the future so we can catch up again, you know, and
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
I do follow up. So I think
Yeah.
we're going to let, you know, a year go by, maybe less, depending on what changes in your life. And we'd love to welcome you back for a part 2 on
I
the
would
Backyard
love
Horse
that. This has been
Enthusiast.
so much fun. I've loved talking to you.
Same,
Yeah,
same. Thank you so much,
thank
and
you.
good luck with all of your future plans. We'll be riding this journey with you. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Take care.